Welcome to this webinar. My name is Seth and I'm the Membership Engagement Officer here at the EAUC. Apologies for any background noise that you may hear. We're having some tree maintenance done outside of our building. Welcome to today's exchange webinar. The title of this webinar is NUS Divest-Invest and it will last approximately 1 hour. Thank you for registering and thank you to Jamie, Head of Sustainability at NUS, who will be leading today's webinar. Just a little bit of housekeeping to go over. I'm hoping that everyone can hear me well. For the time being, I've placed all of your microphones on mute to avoid any background noise. You have the opportunity to ask at the end of the webinar, during the Q&A session, to ask any questions you might have. You can do so by clicking the microphone button to the right-hand side of your name at the top right of the screen. If you don't have a working microphone, you can use the chat box in the right-hand side corner of your screen, and please type any questions you have into that chat box, which can be found at the bottom right. If you have any technical issues at all throughout this webinar, please let me know by posting this chat box or by sending me an email to sikirby@eauc.org.uk. This webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded as a resource with all presentations later on today. Please feel free to share these resources with anyone who may be interested. Once the webinar is finished, you will be sent a short survey for us to gain your feedback. Please take a few minutes to complete the survey, as the results will help improve our CPD and events. That's all from me for now. Thanks again for registering, and I'll now pass you over to Jamie.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. I'll proceed then. So I'm just going to talk for probably 15 to 20 minutes and just talk you through our Divest-Invest campaign and the research that we've recently done. And then there'll be plenty of opportunity for comments and questions towards the end. It's quite a formative process, this campaign, in that we're only just getting going on it. So I'd really appreciate some honest feedback at the end as to what you think, how we can improve it, what you think the barriers we might face are, and how it's relevant or could be more relevant to you all. So just a little bit on what divestment is. Basically, it's the opposite of investment. So it's taking investment away from something. It's worth saying NUS has had, is a 94-year-old organisation. We've had an awful lot of, been a part of many of the big social justice issues of the day. And actually we've used divestment before. Predominantly, you can see on the screen, there's a poster from the 1970s. Whoever's just joined, could you mute? Is making quite a bit of typing background noise. So this was seen as a pivotal moment of the anti-apartheid Barclays campaign ran in the 1970s and 80s, when Barclays actually, as a result of the pressure that we and others applied on them, divested from South Africa, and that was in a pivotal moment in the collapse of the apartheid regime. So it can have big effects. Moving your money can have big effects. 3 years ago, People and Planet published a report called Knowledge and Power. They came up with a figure between £1 and £5 billion of money by UK universities invested in the fossil fuel industry, and it was based on a very small number of FOIs at the time. Since then, People and Planet have run a number of successful divestment campaigns, which typically ask institutions to divest and then turn up the pressure, sometimes involving direct action, as you can see on this photo, which I think was up at Edinburgh. It's only kind of part of the story though, so getting an institution to divest, whether it's through collaborative means or through sort of campaigning like this, it's more about, that's only kind of part of it. What's more important is what they do with the money when they reinvest it. So taking out fossil fuels and just shoving it into other FTSE 100 companies, which arguably aren't great positive investments, isn't necessarily what we need. So a lot of our campaign is focused, or is going to be focused on the reinvestment and actually putting it into renewables, clean tech companies, maybe on campus energy efficiency. Jonathan Porritt came out last year with this statement that engaging engaging with oil companies is futile. Basically, he had spent 10 years trying to work with big oil and get them to re-engineer their business models around more renewable technologies, but he's obviously unconvinced that they were taking that seriously. That was interesting. And I think Edinburgh as well, if Edinburgh on the line, that they did some construction engagement with some of the oil companies that they're investing in, and found that a very small percentage, very tiny, 2 or 3% I think it was, the money that they turn over, certainly for one of them, I think it was Shell or BP, is invested into renewables research or technology or development. So they're still very much business's model, which is extracting and selling these commodities as energy resources. Other stuff that's going on, I mean, we've got quite an anti-renewables government at the moment who are cutting feed-in tariffs, stopping onshore wind, and putting questions for offshore wind as well, which we want to do something about and oppose. The other thing, with the EAUC and NUS State of the Sector and ECU State of the Sector report last year, it found that 2/5 of sustainability managers of institutions, H institutions, thought that they would miss their own carbon targets. So some of that rhetoric, I think, is coming down from government and is now starting to impact the resources that institutions put towards carbon reduction. So all of these things kind of feed into our thoughts around what Divest-Invest should look like. And of course, we had the Student Scheme Fund for 2 years, which was a £5 million investment in student-led sustainability. And now that's come to a close. More than half the projects are continuing on a self-funded basis. But even so, the student union movement are ready for the next big thing. And we kind of felt that something around Divest-Invest could be the next big thing. We were shaped by this policy, which came in from Canterbury Christchurch Student Union to NUS conference last year, in April last year. It was actually passed, so it's now NUS's policy to launch a major campaign for universities and colleges to invest in renewables, which is that bottom result there. And we've been making some noises for a while. That's Piers Telemack, who's our Vice President Society Citizenship. So he's my boss. He's the elected officer that leads our sustainability and responsibility work, if you will. And he's been talking about how we could be doing more to move the money and support renewables for some time. So a couple of arguments for fossil fuel divestment. Well, pretty much every university is a charity, and within the charitable remit, they're there for the public good. And arguably investing in fossil fuel companies isn't there for the public good, or isn't in the public good. There's a financial argument, quite a striking one. Until just last week, actually, oil prices have been dropping and dropping, and especially post-Paris, there's an argument that when there's 5 times more fossil fuels known about already than can be safely burned, especially if we're going to limit global temperature rise to less than 2 degrees. So on that basis, they're a bit of a risky investment. These companies, if they're not going to evolve, can't sell what they already know about. So the risk of stranded assets is quite high. Basically, a stranded asset is where you cling on to an investment hoping it'll go up, but it doesn't. And you end up having an asset on your hands which is either unsaleable or you'll get very little return for. The notion, I suppose, of all these divestment initiatives is that you just keep chipping away at a much bigger block, and eventually it will collapse or something will change. And that's exactly what happened in South Africa around apartheid. There was enough pressure with divestment adding to that pressure that the apartheid block eventually collapsed. Clearly, I've already said that renewables need more investment in this country, especially now that there's a lot less support from government for them. We know that students and staff want more renewables. I'll show you a slide or two of the new data that support that. And finally, when we talk a lot about the skills through the NUS survey that we think students need for sustainability leadership, so things like critical thinking and political agency, and actually getting them involved, students and student officers involved in a juicy campaign allows them to develop some of the skills that we think will mean that they make better leadership decisions when they get into positions of authority after their education. So the good news is we've received some external funding to run a Divest-Invest campaign, which means we can do a real proper job of it. We've received £64,000 from Sainsbury's Family Charitable Trust over 18 months. And the concept of the campaign which is about to start, basically it's building on that grassroots divestment work that People and Planet have started, but actually mainstreaming it through the student union movement. So NUS is a confederation of 600 student unions, of which about 130 are in higher education. People on Planet are a grassroots activist movement with groups on about 40 or 50 campuses, so we're a much bigger movement, and actually we can mainstream issues in a way that they can't just because they haven't got the reach at the moment. So we're working closely with people on Planet, but building on their good initial work. Well, a slightly different approach though. Ours we think will be much more collaborative. So student unions and institutions work very closely with sort of students as partners, students at the heart of the system, students as the co-creators of the curriculum and the education system these days. And student union presidents meet up with university leaders on a regular basis, the vice chancellor and pro-vice chancellors on a regular basis. And we're trying to use that trusted relationship to lever and influence change rather than it being sort of shouting, campaigning, direct activism route. And of course there's still room for that, and PNP will still continue to do that, I'm sure, but ours will be much more partnership focused. We really want to reframe it, so it's not about divestment, it's about reinvestment. So we could actually create some positive opportunities for the institution on a whole range of issues, but predominantly through the investment in renewables and clean tech, whether that's on or off campus. Off campus being investing in companies that do this elsewhere, or on campus actually helping the institution to save money through energy efficiency or renewables. We've deliberately framed our work around endowments because they're quite easy to define, they're quite tightly defined. So endowments basically are where the university has been left some money and it can't spend that money, it can only invest it, and then it can spend the return on investment, the profit that they make. Endowments are invested in all different things. Some are invested in property. Endowments can be invested in things like energy efficiency, so long as the savings are ring-fenced and put back into the endowment. It varies depending on which institution and how they interpret it, but you can't go and take your endowment and put it into something you won't get a return on investment in. So it's down to individual institutions to decide. And we think about framing a lot of these arguments around a reduction in financial risk. There's a statistic on the slide there that listed equities in the extractive sector have lost more than half of their capital value in 5 years. So other sectors have been growing, and actually this sector has been pulling down the return on investment. So it's a good time to look at alternatives. So we've got 3 phases of our campaign. The first one is research. And we did 2 sets of nationwide FOIs about 6 months ago. We're still getting some of the data back in, but we drew a line under it early in January and published a report. The second one was a national survey of students and staff on attitudes towards divestment, reinvestment, renewable. So let's talk you through the first set of data, which is the attitudes work, which is published. This is just the summary slides. So on university investments, I suppose the first thing to note is the second chunk of sort of tan-coloured statistics halfway down on the left. Only 26% of students and staff, this was a base of about 3,700 respondents. So only 26% thought that their institution was good at considering the views of students, and only 21% thought it was good at considering the views of staff. 61% were unaware of processes to raise concerns about investment decisions. And only 44% of those surveyed believe their institution's investments are currently contributing towards the public benefit, so the public good. Now on the green boxes on the right, this was about research. So the first set was on how universities invest their money. The second one's on research. So only 29% believe that most of the research carried out by the institution is contributing to the public benefit, and that's a lot lower than we thought actually. This is the academic and the student community think there's a lot of research being done which isn't in the public interest, which is surprising, given that our institutions are arguably there for the public good. So on the next slide, under pensions, interestingly 58% said that maximising financial return was the priority for the pension scheme, closely followed by 55% around the ethical credentials of the company's industry. So basically there's not a lot of difference between, in terms of pension holders, between how much money they make and where they're invested, which is a great finding in its own right. And then at the bottom there, the third tick on the left, 47% would consider opting for a fossil-free investment option within their pension scheme. Unfortunately, none really exist at the moment, but that's certainly something which we can start to engage pension providers with. There's quite a lot of ethical pension options, but not really any around fossil-free at the moment. And then on the right, in the sort of orange boxes, I suppose there's two sets of data here. The top three boxes show that less than 50% of students and staff think that divestment is something that the institution should do. So that in itself is an interesting finding. So divestment doesn't necessarily have a groundswell or majority of support. I mean, 44% is still quite high, but it's not over the magic half mark. But actually, if you look at the bottom, the 87, the 86, and the 85%, there's a real strong support for renewables. So the way we're going to frame our work is, it isn't necessarily about the divestment, which is a negative side, which students and staff are less sure about. It's actually about the reinvestment, the positive side. So there's definitely students and staff are united on their wanting more investment in renewables, energy efficiency. That constitutes a reframing, really, of the debate and the discussion around divestment. And then finally, into what it might be reinvested to, 85% say a university or college should buy or generate more renewable energy, which is really high. And 61%, the bottom right-hand box in green, say the university should use 100% renewable energy, so either buy or generate. So it's really big figures there supporting renewables again, and some quite useful statistics. Well, actually, just zoom back one slide, there was one statistic I wanted to show you that I forgot. It's the one in the middle, which is on the right, which is 50% of students say that they would be more likely to donate to the university as alumni later in their career if they knew the institution had stopped investing in fossil fuels. So that's also quite an important finding because it has a financial connotation with further income. Okay, so that was the data on attitudes, and then the data from the Freedom of Information requests around what institutions are actually doing at the moment. Well, firstly, it's worth saying that we didn't have an amazing response rate to our FOIs. I mean, we actually had a very good response rate from non-Oxford and Cambridge institutions and their colleges, but of the 65 or so Oxford and Cambridge colleges, we only had 4, I think, that responded. So what is interesting is that we know the size of the UK's total university endowment funds, about 11.5 billion. But if you take Oxford and Cambridge out of that, it's only 3.1 billion. So it's it's no coincidence that the people that didn't respond were the ones with the money, you think, or the vast majority of the money. But if you look at all the institutions that responded, 121 in total, 9.28% of their listed equity investments through their endowments, that's shares to you and me, were invested in the fossil fuel industry. So if we actually take that and apply it across the whole 11.5 billion, so the knowns and the unknowns, then we come up with a figure of about 600 million that we think is invested in the fossil fuel industry. The actual known figure for how much money is from all those that actually responded is 187 million. So 187 million is definitely invested in fossil fuel industries, and we think for the whole sector it's going to be about 600 million. And that's quite a bit less than People and Planet's report, which found between 1 and 5 billion, but that was based on, I think it was less than 10 FOIs, and that was based on 121, so it's much bigger figures and more representative, we think. So if you take that 181.7 and known investments, actually on the bar chart, it's the 54% that we're most interested in. So just under 100 million is invested in extractor companies. So that is the likes of Shell and BP and Exxon. They're the ones that actually take the resources out of the ground. The 23%, the 41.6 million, are supply companies, so that's your British Gases and the Eons. They're the ones that market it, really, effectively. They're, if you like, wholesalers. And the 41.2 million are those that are involved in some way in the infrastructure or technology. So they might be producing pipelines, they might be producing technology, oil rigs, and all that sort of stuff. Now, some of the companies in the 23 and the 23% are actually doing quite a lot on renewables, and not necessarily a clear-cut decision that we should divest from them. So they're involved in the fossil fuel industries. However, there's really no doubt that the 54% are targets for the divestment campaign. So one of the big things from our campaign is that we'll be trying to get 100 million, that one, 100 million divested and reinvested, because it's quite clear-cut. There's no real argument defending them. The pink boxes at the bottom, we found that 14% of universities reported having governors linked to the fossil fuel industry, and only 5% in colleges. We were quite surprised that 14% was a lot higher than we thought. So we didn't define what involved means, but it could be works at a fossil fuel company, it could be as a major shareholding in a fossil fuel company, it could be they sit on the board of a fossil fuel company. And the box in tab at the bottom is, I think, quite a positive thing actually. So although we found this 181 million in fossil fuels, we only found 13 million in the arms trade and 4.6 million in the tobacco industry. So these are more established divestment campaigns, and the fact that they have been successful in getting universities to move their money shows what we might be able to achieve if we get it right with divest and reinvest. Somebody made the point actually at one of these webinars recently that the reason universities don't invest much in tobacco, certainly, or indeed the arms trade, is the influencing or the influencing effect of funders of, say, cancer research for tobacco. So I understand that universities are less likely to get funding from someone like Cancer Research UK if they have shareholdings in tobacco companies. So there's a thing for us around how we can influence funders of universities in relation to climate change, because climate change is a big health issue, for example. Okay, so there's some interesting boxes on blue, in blue on the right as well. Just having a quick scroll through, basically it's showing that there's less impact and less money to be moved in terms of indirect influence, the bottom box, in colleges than there is in universities, but we would expect that because they have a much less rate turnover. But also the top boxes, we asked about research money from fossil fuel companies, so 18.7 million of research money was funded directly by the fossil fuel industry, and that works out as something like 4% of all of the private or corporate investment money that went into UK universities. So it's actually quite small, and I think probably the way we'll frame that is, would we really miss it? Just 4% of the income from research from private companies, if it was to go. If it had been a lot higher, arguably there would have been a more great financial burden should it have gone. So that may become part of our campaign in due course. Okay, so that was the data, and you can ask me some questions on that in a moment, and we can always zoom back to the slides as needs be. We launched our big Divest-Invest campaign. You see the picture in the middle of students with 100 paper windmills on the SOAS lawn, which has agreed to divest and reinvest in London. Each windmill represents 100 million that we want to move. We launched it on about the 19th of January with a banner with a 100 million target. And we've got 3 campaign objectives, if you like. The first one is that we'll get every penny of the 98.8 million known endowments in fossil fuels divested and reinvested into energy efficiency, clean tech or renewables. So that could be on campus to support some of the work that state departments do up and down the country. It could be through listed equity, so companies that are involved in these sorts of things. The second one is that we want to get as many universities and colleges as possible, regardless of whether they have endowments. So it is a UK-wide ask for every university and college, all 600 of them, just not to put any new money into fossil fuels. So there are other investments other than endowments. There's pension schemes, there's insurance policies, there's bank accounts, various other sorts as well. So we're just asking them to make a commitment not to invest in fossil fuel companies. And the third one is we want to get as many universities and colleges as possible to commit to 100% renewable energy by a date of their choosing. So there's the RE100 pledge, which the likes of IQ and Unilever have signed, which is predominantly just for businesses, and we're talking to them about how we can develop that for the tertiary education sector. According to the ESA statistics, institutions are already being 100% powered because they're buying all their green energy. But the average for UK universities 2 years ago was 39% green energy being procured, and on top of that developing 1.2% of their own in terms of renewables. It's obviously much higher for some universities and lower for others. But that was the sector average. We'd quite like to bump that up in time through a targeted commitment linked to the divestment work. Got a wonderful new Divest-Invest microsite which was launched, which is the hub for our work on this. Basically our plan, so we've got a campaigner who's now working for us, Laura. She sits on our campaign team. She's going to go and engage and support student officers and student union campaign teams. We're thinking we need to engage some key partner organisations like the British University Finance Directors Group, the managers of the key funds which universities invest in. There are already a couple of carbon-free funds which have been developed, such as one by BlackRock, so we want to engage the likes of them. We think EAUC, the Vice Chancellor's Group, will be important, the Energy Consortium as well. And we're also thinking we'd get some activist chancellors together. So Jonathan Porritt is an activist, or a chancellor at Keele, or a chancellor at Keele. And then there are other chancellors which are involved in a professional level on sustainability around the country. So we'll try and engage them and maybe get them to write a letter to Guardian or Times Higher supporting the Divest-Invest work that we're doing and others do. We're thinking we'll engage generic students through competitions, might be poetry competitions, art competitions, whatever that might be, as a way of engaging just more than student union officers, which we think will be important in the long run as well. And we think we'll have an annual seminar and summit where we bring together students, student officers and staff to celebrate what we've achieved, but also collaborate as well. A big part of our work will be supporting student unions to engage and support their institutions. And one of the key resources that we know we've got to produce soon is some guidance on what positive investment is. All very easy, really, to make the divestment case and for institutions to commit to divesting, but actually, what do you put your money into? What sort of rate of return do you get on those sorts of things? What are the options available to institutions? So we need to get our head around that quite quickly, looking at the right partners to work with on that. And a large part of our role will be celebrating successes. We won't necessarily shout about the local successes because we want student unions locally to take the glory for their influencing work with the institutions and the success with the institutions. So we'd much rather institutions and the student unions celebrated it locally. And what we'll do is collect up the stories nationally and make some positive noises about what we've achieved as a movement. And we're thinking we'll also have a parliamentary reception at the end of year 2 to celebrate and thank everyone for their work. So specific tasks, some students' unions interestingly have endowments. NUS actually has an endowment of £400,000 which is invested just in a general charity scheme, which unfortunately also includes oil, gas and all the usual stuff. So we've got to divest, reinvest ourselves. And also we're paying money into a closed pension scheme which is also investing in oil and gas. So we've got some work ourselves to do. That will be an interesting learning journey. We'll come across many of the same sorts of questions, I think, that institutions will. So we're going to get on with that straight away. I mentioned there wasn't a great response rate, certainly from Oxford and Cambridge, in terms of the freedom of information requests. When we had 120 of the, I suppose if you include all Oxford and Cambridge colleges, it's probably about 180 institutions, HE institutions. So we will try and fill in the blanks by seeing if we can get the information out of them through other ways or by challenging some of their decisions not to provide the information to us through the FOI legislation. We've also said we'd like to develop a community-owned renewables pilot. So what we mean by this is at Leeds and Lancaster, actually, independently of our work, staff have said they would have been interested in, or are interested in, some sort of campus bond where they invest money in renewables on campus, and some of the feed-in tariffs would come back to them. But the energy, either the university would get the free energy. Of course, it's much more difficult for that now the feed-in tariffs are going, and there's less financial incentive to do it. But there is still, we know from the data, I didn't present that statistically, but there's still quite a lot of interest in from students and staff in investing in renewables, even their own money, not just necessarily institutions' money. We're also going to do a bit of campaigning against the government's decision to apply the 2% climate change levy on green energy, which we think is a threat to the 39% that's already bought of green energy. It's a crazy decision to apply what is basically a green tax on green energy. I'm not sure how they sneak that through, but that's something we'll be doing some lobbying work around. And finally, as mentioned earlier, making the link between campaigning and developing the right skills in students and student officers to make them better leaders around sustainability. The third phase, if you like, the first phase was research, the second phase is the campaign itself, and the third phase is just the sub-themes of pensions and research. So USS, which some of you may be part of, the University Superannuation Scheme, the second largest publicly funded or owned pension scheme in the country. Its largest single investment until a couple of weeks ago actually was Shell. So we're talking about moving 100 million of endowments money. They have 340 million alone invested in Shell because Shell's oil price, because the oil price collapsed until recently. Shell has actually dropped down off the top into the second position. I think it's a commodities company that's at the top now. So actually, you probably know that Share Action is doing a lot of work on this with UCU, who are one of the principal employers on the board of USS. But actually, Share Action was initially set up as ethics for USS. So for the last 15 years, they've been trying to get USS to do some interesting stuff with its investment portfolio. As yet, they haven't succeeded, so we're keen to support and see how we can change that. We're keen to engage the research funding councils, that point around tobacco and how tobacco investments have declined as a result of the influencing work of funders. We're planning on doing that by holding an academic seminar on climate change in relation to research work, which won't be seen as an NUS thing, although we'll help convene it. It's probably going to be a UCU thing in London, sometime later this academic year actually. We're going to get on with that quite quickly. Okay, and we're nearly there. Just to say, you probably saw last week there, it was on the front page of the Independent actually, and the Guardian also produced it. But Oxbridge academics wrote a letter, public letter, saying they think that their institution should divest, which came on the back of our report, although our report wasn't widely cited, the figures we used. And it got the headlines because it was the previous Archbishop of Canterbury and some quite senior people who basically said Oxford and Cambridge shouldn't be investing in this stuff. So that's quite useful and quite topical and very supportive of what we're doing. Okay, so that's enough talking from me. We've got half an hour for you to ask questions or comments or put things in the chat box as you see fit, really. There's a question in from Carl. Is there a plan to look at pension funds further down the line after endowments? Yes, there is. So we are focusing on endowments now, Carl, because it's easy, quite high profile and easy to define. We will do some work around pensions, but as I mentioned, it's just going to be a sub-theme. And it's probably going to be behind the scenes influencing more than public stuff. The problem is we can't really influence your pension schemes because we're not, I don't have USS and none of the people in student unions or officers have a USS pension scheme. So we're not, we're not members of your scheme, and it's difficult for us to influence it. What we can do is share the information with people like you who can ask tricky questions. Unfortunately, USS seems quite resistant to change, despite the fact that people have been asking them to change for some time. I mean, they're a very small team, but it's amazing they employ sort of a couple of people in the communications team who bat off suggestions from staff around or questions around what their pension's been invested in. But no, we will be doing some stuff on it, but all the activity will happen over the next 18 months, so whether or not that happens at the start of next academic year or towards the end of this, we're not sure yet. Okay, any other questions from anyone or comments? Okay, there's one in from Jeff. She says, you mentioned you're continuing off the back of P&P's previous campaign. Will you be formally linking with them? Well, yes, Jeff, we will. So actually, P&P helped shape this work, and P&P commented on our bid to Sainsbury's family before we submitted it. And we talk quite regularly with them, so we're going to be working very closely with them. And Laura, who's the campaigner working for us now, has just met with them. We'll meet with them once a month. So we see our work as being entirely complementary. We just see different tactics really. So we're going to try and mainstream it through the Student Union's trusted relationship with the institution, whereas P&P will, make the noise and arguably make and take the headlines, which is fine with us because that's what they do so well, sort of activistic campaigning work. But yeah, so we're in cahoots with them, and we've both got the same objectives. We've just got a different way of getting there. Okay, any other questions or comments? I can go back and go through any of the data if you think it's useful. I should say that the full reports are all published, and then I've only given you a summary. There's backs of really juicy data that I haven't gone through, so please do have a look in your own time as well.
Hi Jamie, it's Meg.
Hi Meg.
Hi. Just wondering if you're going to be offering advice to students and student officers on advising their universities on alternative investment options. I don't know, you might have covered this. Somebody came into my office whilst you were talking earlier.
It's all right. Thanks, it's a good question. So we will, and that's something we're going to do over the next couple of months. So the divestment bit, the reinvestment bit's the tricky bit, and we can't say invest in this because we're not financial advisors, and if every university invested in this and it went wrong, then we would seem to bring tertiary education collapsing to its knees. Then we'd be in all sorts of trouble. So I think what we're going to do is produce some resource packs around the sorts of things you can invest in. Now, part of it will depend. I think we probably missed the trick with the original FOI to ask what return on investments they've been getting, but that isn't the end of the world because we asked where they're investing at the moment, which listed equity pots or funds they're investing in. So we can look on the website to see how their funds have been performing. I mean, our own scheme that I mentioned, our £400,000 endowment, has been getting about an 8 or 9% return on investment a year for the last 5 years. So that's going to be tricky to match through some of the other schemes, I think. But some of them may not have been performing quite so well. So I suppose what we need to do is go around and ask environmental managers what energy efficiency schemes or what renewable schemes they think they could get, a 5 to 10% return on investment on over a long time frame, and then we can, add that to the local case. But we could, we'd also look at community-owned renewable schemes and get some examples of that in, as well as simple listed equity investments. I mentioned BlackRock has got a carbon-free investment option already.
Oh, right, okay.
So BlackRock's where I think there are 12 universities use BlackRock already. So actually they'll just move it from one pot of investments in BlackRock to another pot of investments in BlackRock. What we need to do is our homework and find out how it's got a new fund, how that's been performing compared to the standard BlackRock investment pot. So there's quite a bit of work we've got to do for now, but hopefully in the next 2 months we'll have that guidance out.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. That'd be really useful.
Okay, thanks for the question. Anything else from anyone? There's a question from Pierre. Have you had a look at the financial trade-offs when scaling up investment in renewables? Pierre, I'm not sure what you mean by financial trade-offs. Do you mean linked into the feed-in tariffs? said it means return over risk rates. Okay. Yeah, so financial investments are always just risks, aren't they, basically? But you make a good point. So investing in renewables is likely to give you a much safer return on investment, albeit a slightly lower return on investment. What was interesting is Dong Energy, who's the world's largest investor in offshore wind renewable energy, have just agreed to put in the world's largest renewables, offshore renewables project in the North Sea. And what I was thinking was, I mean, we know them anyway because they sit on a sort of environmental lobby group, business lobby group, that's called the Aldersgate Group. And I was thinking you could imagine there would be 3 or 4 wind turbines, or even 10 or 20 wind turbines in the North Sea, which could be the universities' wind turbines, and they will give a fairly good rate of investment. I'm not sure what. So there might be some commercial applications, but you're right, it's a case of more long-term guaranteed, less volatility in your return on investment versus a slightly lower rate of return on investment. So I imagine investing in a renewable installation means that if there is another bubble or another financial recession, you're not going to be affected by it. So that's something we'll have to make the case on as well. That's a good point there, thank you for that. Okay. So we've got something in from Carl and Rebecca. Very interested in terms of percentage students who would donate as alumni. Yeah, so it's 50%, I think it was, wasn't it? So we asked the question, I can't remember exactly the wording of it, but basically it was something along the lines of, would you be less likely to donate if you knew your institution had divested from fossil fuels? And 50% said more likely to donate. So that is useful, and it's something that if universities aren't that bothered about divesting or reinvesting, it might be something, a statistic to release to those that are making decisions. Grand. Are there any other questions? We've got time if we need it. I do hope, I mean, for those of you that work in estates teams, I do hope that this will free up some investments for stuff you want to do. So one of the things that I'll put around the EAUC mail base soon will be which of you are considering, or who of you are considering, large-scale energy efficiency, carbon reduction, renewables projects, and what sort of return on investment will you get. Because it'd be good to get some case studies, because it might be that you're struggling to get the money in to actually approve some of these projects, but actually, if it can be linked to the fact that this money needs to be divested, and your institution has 3 or 4 million going free, then it could be reallocated or diverted into a project which will, help you with your carbon reduction, and certainly help us with the divest reinvestment commitment. Okay. Any other questions before we draw it to a close? Just put on my contact details on the final slide. So if any of you have got anything else that you want to ask, then my details are on, my email address is on the screen, so you can contact me directly. I'll be, I think, at the EAUC conference in May as well, and we haven't put a session about this, but I'm sure there'll be lots of discussions around the rooms on it, so you can always comment and feed in then, and I'll certainly be active on the mail base, the EAUC mail base as well, over this stuff. Great. Right, Seth, well, do you want to draw it to a close if there's no other questions?
Yep. Thanks, Jamie. That's brilliant. Thanks. Yeah. So that's the end of today's webinar. Yeah, thanks again for sharing your insights, Jamie. I will send a link to the podcast shortly afterwards so you have it, and feel free to share it around your colleagues. But yeah, thank you for joining us today.
Okay, thanks everyone.